As I navigate business, life, and everything that goes into that, even my recent announcement, campaigning for local school board, I'm constantly reminded that standing firm in my beliefs invites opposition. And the question that I constantly ask myself, and many people are asking me, is how do we engage with those who challenge our convictions while staying true to our core values? What's up, everybody? It's Ryan Miller back here on another episode of Unlocking Greatness. And you may be saying to yourself, Ryan, where's the intro? Where's the music? Where's all that? You know what? We're trying some new things and we're going to see whether or not this works out well. We just want to get right into the topic of discussion for the day. We don't necessarily need all that fluff. Anyway, so how do we engage with those that challenge our convictions? How do we navigate criticism and opposition that seems to be happening more and more on the regular, particularly for those of us, I'm going to lump myself into a lot of this, particularly for those of us that are public, that have a public persona, whether that be just a very influential business environment that you're a part of, or maybe a personal community. Maybe you lead a specific group in your community, or you're influential at church or at school. There's just a variety of different ways in which we can make ourselves public, maybe even just having a public profile on social media, which I have some of those, and some of them are private. Anyway, how do we deal with those things? How do we engage those things? You know, a lot of people ask me that question, and they're regularly saying, like, Ryan, how do you deal with that? And really what they're asking is like, how do you deal with the negativity? How do you deal with the constant frustration and maybe even anger that boils up? And it's a great question. And I want to come right out and say that it's not easy. It is not easy to deal with people that are saying negative things, particularly when they are not true. I'm going to share a couple of different examples a little bit later on in this specific episode. But, you know, if somebody was to make an accusation about me, or make a statement about me that was true, that had truth to it, that would hurt. But I've learned that I've got to eat it. I've got to accept the fact that I have offended somebody. Thank God I've gotten a lot better at how I communicate publicly. And so typically when people are making accusations, they're false, or they are misdirected, or they're formed based on opinion and not truth. But it's hard for somebody nowadays, and I'm grateful for this, to attack my character, because I have worked really hard to carry myself with integrity in all places that I am. Not to say I'm perfect, I'm not. I still make mistakes. I still say and do things I shouldn't do at times. But by and large, I've gotten really good at being able to be the best version of myself. But it's hard to deal with this, even, you know, when they're false. It's like, well, you shouldn't pay attention to false story. You shouldn't pay attention to false narrative, but it's hard. It's frustrating. It's angering. It brings out the old you know, the one that you want to scream and yell and fight. And that's just not helpful for anybody. And it's really dang immature. It's easy to see that in other people. It's hard to see that in ourselves sometimes. Anyway, so this is something that we're regularly having to deal with when we are public about our convictions, about our beliefs, particularly when they do not fit into the common narrative of the day. Now, you may say to yourself, probably most of you listening to this align with most of what I say, even though it's really cool. I had a guy come up to me recently in response to my episode on churches being engaged in politics, and said, I really liked your episode, even though I don't agree with what all you say. And so I appreciate that there's those of you out there that don't agree with everything I say, and you continue to listen. I would love to hear more of that feedback. What is it that you don't agree with? Why don't you agree with it? Let's have some dialogue so we can learn from each other. Maybe we don't even have to change each other's minds, but maybe change each other's hearts a little bit towards the opposing side in a discussion or a conversation or a belief. Anyway, so all this is happening, and it has been heightened again recently for me. So I've felt this in waves. It was very, very loud and chaotic from mid 2019 through like 2022. And that was a combination of just the racial wars and chaos we were having in this country, which led to a lot of social and ideological differences. Then that was compounded by the pandemic and differing beliefs over whether we take shots or no shots, masks or no masks, get back in person, don't get back in person, right? So all these things are happening. And so there was just a massive influx of negativity that was being spread towards people when they didn't align over certain things. And I was definitely, gosh, I don't want to say victim. I don't feel like I'm a victim. I was definitely on the receiving end of a lot of that because I was very public in my stance on the virus and the vax and how our government was handling all of that and going back to work and all that stuff. Anyway, so it was just it was heavy. It was a lot. And it hadn't really tapered off too much. I mean, it did over the last like year or so, though I was realizing that the trailing effect of that was I had been losing a lot of business opportunities for being so public about my faith and my viewpoints on politics and, whatever, things like that. Anyway, so it has had a huge resurgence in a microcosm. And I say a microcosm because it's just really happening in my local community here in Southern California. In Yorba Linda, California, as a matter of fact, Yorba Linda, Placentia. And that's because I chose 2 months ago to run for school board. And I didn't realize, I had been warned, and yet I didn't realize how nasty people could be. And 24 hours into me announcing my campaign, complete strangers started taking shots at me online. They were scrubbing my social media profile, manipulating things I said, calling me a misogynist and a bigot and a Christian nationalist, though I don't have that big of a problem with that one because I am a Christian and I love my country. But anyway, they were just calling me all kinds of names. And it was crazy because they didn't even know me, like, at all. These were complete strangers that took tweets or posts on X, Facebook posts, Instagram posts, and either didn't understand the context or intentionally twisted them out of context. And so here I am again, just having a lot of fun dealing with all of this just loud nonsense. And I say nonsense because it's all unfounded criticism and critique and negativity and assumption. And I do not respect people that act that way on either side. If there is somebody that is supporting me but takes shots like that at my opposition, I don't appreciate that either. I don't respect that. I feel like we all must carry ourselves as adults. When we are waving the banner of Jesus, we must do so as Christians, which means we are to honor and love everybody. I'll get more into that in a little bit. Anyway, so I just seen it happen, and there's been this rise. Anyway, so I've shared a little bit of it recently. And as I have, again, people have been asking me, Ryan, how do you navigate all this criticism, all this opposition? And they're not just asking because they want to know how I do it. I know they're asking because they want to know how they do it, either because they're facing some of it themselves or because they want to be more public about their personal convictions and they're afraid to because of the negative criticism and opposition that they know they're going to face based upon seeing that happen from other people. So it's out there, it's happening, and I want to be clear. As a Christian and a conservative and a white guy born and raised in Southern California, I understand why people will criticize me based on assumptions. So I get it. It's wrong, but I understand. I even understand that once I call myself a Christian, that you are going to assume certain things about me that are going to end up being true. But you just don't understand how I'm applying my beliefs to the things that I'm called to do. Because if you knew me, you would know that I treat all people equally. even when I completely disagree with them. Friends will say that, clients will say that. Anyway, so I understand why people were asking me these questions, and I understand that it's gonna happen. I understand that Christian, conservative, these are polarizing, contentious words. They shouldn't be, but they are. And this is not an accusation against the left or a non-Christian. I'm speaking from personal experience. I know that if somebody was to say that I'm a Democrat, that I'm a progressive, that I'm a liberal, that I'm an atheist, people will assign labels to you too. They will make assumptions of what you think and what you believe and yada, yada, yada. So again, I'm not going to keep qualifying that back and forth because I'm speaking from my own personal experience. But I know that this happens everywhere, across every belief, on every side of the equation or the coin. There's only two there, but you get what I'm saying. Okay, so I want to start off by talking a little bit about the impact of this criticism, because when people say like, "Matt, how do you navigate this?" The first thing is like, how do you deal with it? Like how do you deal with somebody making a false accusation that is so mean and so hurtful and so untrue, and yet it still doesn't feel good? How do you deal with somebody that says something about you that's a half truth, but they spin it to be negative, even though it wasn't intended to be that way, because they didn't want to take the time to just ask you? Well, I'll tell you, it's rough. It's frustrating. It makes me mad. Like there are times, like there is this one guy in particular in my local community that has been taking shots at me from the day that I announced I was running for school board. I've never met the guy in person. I've never spoken to him face to face. And it takes everything in me not to want to lash out in anger, because I think he's petty. I think he is overcompensating for a weakness that he sees inside of himself. I think that he's afraid to engage in conversation for fear of not being as confident as he thinks he is. Or maybe he's just hiding behind a computer because that way he feels like he's completely protected and can say whatever he wants. And so I get angry, like really angry. But I quickly am reminded by myself or my wife when I talk to her about it, good friends when I talk to them about it, that I'm not going to stoop to that level. I'm not going to go back to being the 19-year-old Ryan that would just, yell and scream and want to fight or something like that, because that solves no problems. So though I'm angry, I have to find ways to reduce that anger without just releasing it in angry ways. And one of the ways that I have found to deal with the anger and really to deal with all of the negative emotional toll that this takes is I start to put myself in their shoes. First of all, actually, I recognize that even if they don't think so, that I know that they were created in the image of God, that they have the same bit of worth and value that I do. I don't think they have a right to say the things they do. Yes, we can talk about free speech. I don't think we have a right to hurl insults at people we don't know, but they have a right to be human. They have feelings. Maybe they're hurt. Hurt people hurt people. Maybe they're angry themselves at something else. Maybe somebody that looks like me or believes like me has hurt them in such a way in the past that it causes them to treat everybody the same way. It doesn't make their behavior right, but I empathize with why they're doing what they're doing. So when I can humanize the person, it helps me to be a bit more gracious to the person. And if I can be a bit more gracious to the person, I become alleviated of that anger that I have towards those people, the frustration that I have towards those people. So that's one of the ways that I deal with the negative emotion or the negative toll that it takes on my mental and emotional well-being. Other things I do is I chalk it up to it is what it is. And I know that sounds kind of silly, but sometimes I just have to let it be. Like most of us, we're not going to have our minds changed, and we're definitely not going to have those change in the midst of an argument. I don't know somebody that's ever been like vehemently yelled at and been like, oh my gosh, you know what? You're actually right. I'm going to change my mind and agree with everything you say. That really doesn't happen. So, um, sometimes I just try to let it be. It just is what it is. Like whatever. I'm just going to let it go. I'm just going to ignore it. I'm just going to set it aside. I'm just going to chalk it up to that's just the way that that person is. The third thing that you can do when it starts to take a toll is to engage. And this is one of the things that I want to talk about. So recently, again, I've had quite a bit of negative feedback, or negative chatter has been out there on the interweb, social media about me, particularly about my Christian beliefs and how they have no place in the school board. That I have no business running for school board because I have no idea what I'm doing, because I have no experience, though I've run multiple businesses and been a part of leadership in some very successful organizations. Oh, and that part about me being a parent for 22 years and navigating that responsibility, both as a parent and then also leading them through their education. So I think that there's some refute there to that accusation that I don't know what I'm doing. Anyway, but I still have a lot to learn. I definitely have a lot to learn. And so as all this has been coming out, I've continued to offer over and over again to as many people as I could that came at me on Twitter, X, or Facebook. I'm like, look at, if you have a question, if you have something to say, then let's just engage directly. Ask me. Bring it up to me. You want to know what I believe? I'll tell you. I'll come right out and say exactly what I'm for and what I'm against. And so that this happened just recently. Somebody had actually reached out to me about a specific thing they were trying to do. But I knew that they were a part of this group that was at least associated with this group that was saying negative things. And I said, hey, if you really care, then let's hop on a call. Let's talk about this. So they obliged, and we had a conversation. And there are three things that I think are really, really helpful for us to consider. And then three things I think that we can put into practice. So when it comes to engaging in conversation with people that differ, because again, you want to talk about navigating criticism and opposition, my recommendation is to try and engage it, but engage it in the right way. And so what is the right way? Well, I think there's three things that you can do to ensure, to the best of your ability. Again, this doesn't always happen, doesn't always work out well, but I think there's three things that we can do to engage with somebody that has come at us in opposition, whether they have been awfully critical or just said a negative thing or two, or maybe they just don't even know what to believe. But they're on an opposing side to us. And this happens in business. This happens in our personal relationships, friendships, and it definitely is happening right in politics. So three things. Number one is commit yourself to respectful dialogue. We must maintain a respectful tone when having conversations with other people. It is easy, particularly when we start to see that there's holes in an argument, when they're not as educated as maybe they said they were, or maybe they don't have the facts, whatever. It's easy, it can be easy to become disrespectful, to demean, to down talk. When they have been rude, cruel to us, it's easy for us to fall into that same trap and do it for them or do it towards them. And I'm going to tell you right now, there's only one way to handle these types of engagements, and that's to be respectful. And with respect, having respectful dialogue, it's not just about having a respectful tone, but it's about showing genuine interest in what the other person is talking about, in what their perspective is. Tell me why you think what you do. Tell me why you believe that about your position, about me. Like, help me to understand. And this is not trying to be contradictory. This is not trying to be condescending. It's like truly showing interest. If you've listened to me for any period of time, you know you're always going to get a Stephen Covey reference. Seek first to understand and then be understood is one of his 7 habits of highly effective people. Seeking first to understand. Let me help to understand. I may still not agree, but at least let me, to the best of my ability and to the best of your communication, understand where you're coming from. That's number 1. Number 2, if you want to engage in a constructive conversation, you have to base your discussion on facts. It is so important that we consistently emphasize evidence and facts over assumptions, opinions, and ultimately misinformation. Or really, maybe I should say we need to emphasize evidence and facts over assumptions and opinions to prevent from further spreading of misinformation. Because what I find often, and this happens in all of the echo chambers that we live in, is we quickly propagate misinformation, and it's typically rooted in some bit of fact, not always, but there's like some little fact there. It's like the game of telephone that the 6-year-olds play. I mean, you get 6 or 7 cups of string down the line, and boy, oh boy, that, blue big truck turns into a hot pink motorcycle, right? Or maybe a brown ape. Like, that's how crazy the conversation gets offline. So it's like it starts somewhat true, and it turns out to be completely crazy. So the only way, like, our opinions are important. They're worth hearing. They're valid. Even when they're wrong, they're valid. And they're valuable. That means we should hear people's opinions. But when it comes to us communicating something about someone or something about something, we must emphasize evidence and facts. If you do not have the facts, you cannot make the claim. I mean, you can, but there's no validity to it. We have to ensure that feelings don't get in the way of facts. And that happens all too often. Look, I can connect. If you've ever been on WebMD, when you had a bump on your leg, like one little red bump, and it was probably that you live in my neighborhood and are constantly getting bit by mosquitoes when you are trying, like, with everything you have to avoid them. I got like 9 on my legs right now. But if you were to go on WebMD and you were to look up little red bump on my leg, you could be dying. I mean, I'm joking, right? But you could get to that place. It so quickly gets out of hand. We have to be careful that we don't let things get out of hand. Evidence and facts should be the primary point of discussion. And thirdly, when it comes to having these conversations, we need to ensure that we are clearly stating and clarifying our position on the key issues that we're discussing. Don't leave it to somebody else to assume how you think, believe, or behave. State it. They can refute it, but state it. This is what I'm for. This is what I'm against. This happens in business. This happens in politics. This happens in faith. This happens all over the place. It happens in relationships. Clearly state your positions. Okay, so 3 things you can do if you want to have these engaging conversations, and this is how you should go into them, right? Respectful dialogue, facts-based discussion, and you should always clarify your beliefs. Like, you should go into that with those intentions. 3 things you can do in the midst of those discussions. So this is what you can practice ahead of time to get better at navigating criticism and opposition. But really, this is just like having good conversation one-on-one. This is having constructive and collaborative conversation one-on-one. 3 things incredibly important for you to think about. Again, another 3. You can tell I was a pastor of a church at one time. There's always 3s. Number 1, active listening. It is critically important that we listen to understand rather than to respond. So I was in this conversation today with somebody that, again, we're quite opposed in a lot of our thoughts and beliefs. And there was multiple times during probably about a 4 or 5 minute monologue that this person sharing that I heard misinformation. Like 100%, beyond a shadow of a doubt, I heard misinformation. Also, there were a few times when something was said and I was like, oh my gosh, I need to address that. But I wanted to hear them completely share their thought. I wanted to hear them go from start to finish with what they were trying to say. And so instead of interrupting or trying to remember what I'm going to say to refute that, I just let it go and trusted that when we got to the end of that however I responded is what was going to be most important in my response back. And so we have to, again, as Covey says, seek first to understand and then be understood. We have to listen to understand rather than to respond. Don't ask questions to give answers. Ask questions to hear a response from them, not from yourself. 2, have empathy and acknowledge what they're saying. Recognize that we all are passionate about the things that we are talking about, that there is bias, that there is emotion, that there is feeling. This is all involved in all of us, not just in the opposition, in you too, in me too. There's emotion in all of this. There's true deep concern. Whether it works out to be factually valid or not, it's real to them. It's real to me. And so we need to empathize with people. I hear you. I understand where you're coming from. Or I hear you. I don't agree with you, but I can see how that would be really important to you. We have to have empathy, and we have to acknowledge the fact that these are real things that people are feeling. You got to practice that before you engage in it. Because if you don't practice empathy, if you don't regularly practice acknowledging the validity of people's concerns, what you are going to end up doing is going into these conversations defensive, and you are going to destroy any opportunity you have to bridge a gap or to allow that person to see you for who you really are. Or maybe they're going to see you for who you really are. So empathy and acknowledgement. And 3, when we are going to go into conversations where we know there is going to be criticism, negativity, opposition, arguing, frustration, we want to make sure that we are setting boundaries. We should set boundaries with them ahead of time. We should also set boundaries with ourselves. We should commit to the things we're going to engage on and what we're not going to engage on. We should commit to questions we will answer, questions we won't answer. We should commit to how we are going to respond in certain situations when presented with certain information, which means you're going to have to be deeply convicted about the things you believe, and you're going to have some basic understanding of what they're trying to say to you. So if you haven't heard it clearly, ask again. Get really clear. Even if, in this instance, as people have been sharing all this kind of misinformation about me, the things that I'm asking them over and over again is, what led you to believe that? What led you to that conclusion? What led you to say the things that you said about me? I know a lot of what the answers are going to be, but still, I want to hear it from them. I want to hear them tell me why they disagree with me, and it's not because they owe it to me. It's because I want to be clear about how to engage in that conversation, because I want to have a productive conversation, not an unproductive one. Most of our wars on social media are totally unproductive. There's no point in having them. That's why I try and invite people to go offline. Now, there was another guy recently that was coming at me pretty hard. And he actually offered to sit down and have a public discussion. He lives in my local community. And I declined because of the way he was saying the things that he did. He was just trying to prove his points to me, and he was hopeful that I would just change my opinion to believe in his. He was condescending. He was twisting words. People Again, people that don't know me don't understand who I am and what I know and how I think. And there are few things that I think very highly of myself in. One of those things is my emotional intelligence, both my self-awareness and the awareness of others, and how the psychology of the human mind factors into how we act, how we think, and how we speak. And so it's so funny to me when people try to play mental gymnastics with me, and when in reality I can see right through it. That's not to say that I don't have things to learn. That's not to say that I don't have that I have everything figured out. But I saw right through what this guy was trying to do, and I had no interest in getting into that type of discussion. I'm not going to placate to garbage just for the sake of you feeling good about trying to win one over on me. Like, if you have facts to change my opinion, bring them. But when you just have a bunch of opinions, I have no interest in that. And when you're trying to just talk down to me without even knowing me, I have no interest in that either. So again, when we set boundaries, we know when to engage, when to disengage. We can take that to social media. We can take that to live in-person conversations. Set boundaries ahead of time, which you will and won't talk about, which you will and won't stand for, and so forth. So 3 things: active listening, empathy and acknowledgement, and setting boundaries. Those are 3 really good practical techniques to have constructive conversations with people that criticize you. Ultimately, what is this about for me? Why is this something that is so important for me? Well, because this has been one of the single greatest ways for me to grow. It has caused me to, have you ever heard of somebody say that you better be careful about praying to God for patience because he's not going to give you patience, he's going to give you ways to be more patient? Well, the same thing goes for every area of our life that we have to grow in. I believe that God, more often than not, will offer us a test to develop our character. In my book, I share this 9 moments in my life, either inflicted by myself or by somebody else. Terrible things, tragic things, hurtful things that were all catalysts to my personal and professional growth. If none of it is true, is an opportunity for us to learn how to better engage with people that criticize us, how to be loving and considerate, to love our enemies and love our neighbors. And just because somebody criticizes me does not mean they're my enemy, but you get what I'm saying here. It's a practice in my beliefs, but oftentimes there is a bit of truth in their statement. Now, I may still not want to change the way I think, but if there's truth to it, then I have to consider how I portray myself to the world around me to ensure that I'm thought as highly of as possible. This isn't about faking it. Again, you know me well enough to know I don't hide things. I don't hide behind my beliefs. I'm a Christian. I worship God above all else. The Bible is my ultimate authority. I have no shame in saying that. And I do my best to live that way. And I do my best to run my business that way. I do my best to go to the gym that way. I do the best to have friendships that way. My marriage, my parenting, my campaign for school board. I will never not say those things, and I will never not use those things to influence how I serve in the capacities that I do. I'll never run from them. I am conservative politically. And I will stand on that forever. I don't completely associate with a party at this point because none of them truly represent my beliefs. But by and large, the Republican Party does a better job of representing the things that I believe to be important in society today. And the Democrats, by and large, misrepresent the things I believe to be important in society today. If you want to have a question or you want to have a discussion on how I come to that conclusion, I'm happy to do that. You can reach out to me. Again, this is how to navigate criticism and opposition and how to grow through it, and I'm more than willing to do that. But anyway, through all of that, it's an opportunity for me to learn, to grow. Like, again, I may stick to my beliefs, but I want to do the best I can to treat everybody equally with love and respect. I want to do my best to communicate in such a way that is not hurtful Now, if you're doing something that I disagree with and it hurts you that I say it, then that's on you. And again, there's some gray area here I know that we get into in society, but that's just the reality of the matter. So again, it's not that I'm going to change the way I believe, but it could change how I communicate what I believe. And I'm open to that all the time. I want to continue to learn and grow. And there is other times, thank God, it has been very, very few and far between. But there have been times when I have been out of character. Somebody has called me out and I've done something about it. A couple of years back, there was a guy on LinkedIn that I felt like was using his platform and negative feedback he got to manipulate other people to create more influence for himself and ultimately business for himself. And I thought it was very, very manipulative. And I said it. I used my platform on LinkedIn to blast him. And not only did I blast him, but I said some not nice things about him, words I used to describe him. And 24 hours went by, and I got some feedback from some people that weren't super happy with what I said. I was standing in my conviction. I thought like somebody needed to say something. And then I'm like, you know what? They're right. Like, I still believe this guy's a jerk. I believe that he did wrong. And I believe that he's manipulating people on the backs of something that he did wrong. But I should have never, ever, ever handled myself that way. And I should have never, ever accused him or called him the names I did. And these weren't like big crazy things, but still, like I should have never done that without knowing him. And so I made a public apology on my LinkedIn again to all the followers there, tagged the guy in the post and said how sorry I was because that was wrong of me to do. No excuses. It was just wrong. Interestingly enough, months later, I run into a colleague that brought me out to an association that he was a part of. I was paid to speak at this event. And he pulls me aside. He says, hey, I just want you to know, many months ago, you had this post where you called this guy out. And then the next day you apologized. He said, I saw the post of you calling that guy out. And I was really bothered by that. And it actually caused me to think that maybe we made the wrong decision in bringing you out to speak. And I was like, but you know me so well. He goes, yeah. And then that was so out of character that I just couldn't understand why you would do something like that. And so I was really calling that into question. He says, but then I saw your public apology the next day and I realized that we made the right choice because we all make mistakes, but you are somebody that owns up to the ones you make. And so be willing to own up to your stuff. We all get caught up. We all get frustrated. We all say things and do things that we probably shouldn't say or do. And so my encouragement to you, in order to best navigate criticism and opposition, is to think. Think about what's at stake. Think about who's involved, and think about how you can best handle the situation. At the end of the day, this is not about just winning an argument. This is about doing the right thing. And even then, there's a lot of gray because the way that you get to the right thing and I get to the right thing could be different. But you need to stand true in your convictions. And ultimately, you've got to rely on something that is a static foundational truth. And that's why ultimately for me, the Bible is the only thing that I stand on. And I try to consistently go back to the Word of God to understand how I'm living in the world that God has created. I hope that's the same for you, but you may not agree to that either. But I think that through all of this, hopefully this has been a helpful way for you to not just hear how I handle this stuff, but to hear how you can handle the criticism, the opposition, the negativity that comes your way as you share your beliefs, as you share your views, as you share your opinions. I want to encourage you to keep doing them. We need more voices in the world today. We don't need the loud minority. We need everybody sharing their beliefs, their viewpoints. We need to hear you. You need to hear me. And we need to have more constructive dialogue because at the end of the day, I believe that we're all out for more of the same things than we are for different things. Hopefully that was helpful for you guys. Hopefully that hope you were happy that I got right to the point, even at the very beginning, and didn't get into a bumper or an intro. We're going to try this a little bit more over the next couple of weeks. We'll see how this goes. I would love to hear feedback from you. If you have any thoughts on this episode at all, any feedback, drop them in the comments if you're watching this on social media like YouTube, DM on any of the social platforms you can find me on, or you can email ryan@ryanjamesmiller.com. I am more than happy to take any feedback. I love the positive feedback. I appreciate that when you guys share kind words, but I'm here for the negative too. If I said something you don't agree with, if I said something I shouldn't have, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm more than happy to have a conversation. As a matter of fact, I'll leave you with this story. Recently on LinkedIn again, somebody commented on one of my posts, something that just seemed so out of left field. It didn't make any sense. And I reached out to him directly and said, hey, I said, I don't know where that came from, but if I offended you in some way, I'm really sorry. And I'd love to have a conversation. So please let me know when you want to talk. And he responded to me in seconds and said, actually, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that. That was not right of me. So please just disregard it. Now, I don't know if that meant because he didn't mean it and said it, or if he meant it and didn't want to confront it. But I just want you to know that we should be willing and open to have these discussions, to open ourselves up to feedback, to respond positively as often as we possibly can. This episode may be about navigating criticism, opposition, and negativity, but ultimately, this is about learning ways to spread more positivity in the world for the good of every single person in this world. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Unlocking Greatness. Can't wait to share with you what's coming up next.